franchise. But what we've done, we've shifted. So we look at the historically discriminated against. So if you fall in that category, whatever ethnicity you may be, whatever gender, whatever section of the country that you come through, whatever the models that we're able to create collectively together, we want to be able, people, when they call us, to tap into that. So we're moving in a progressive way. Um, so your cooperation, when they're talking about data collection, each section, don't forget to have a scribe. That's the person who's going to take notes in your section. Those will be collected and those are going to be interpreted, because that kind of gives us our guidance. The numbers, the data, who we're impacting, how many farmers, how many ranchers, where you come from. All this is moving in a direction that we really need, because that helps us create the roadmap. If all of the NLFR staff and volunteers, if you would stand up now. Don't let me have to point you out, because I know everybody. So if you would stand up on your own. Okay, that's okay. That's okay. Kathy, hold your hand up at least. Okay. Leonard Salgado, if you would hold your hand up. Kathy Caldwell. These are co-chairs for the host committee. The others fill in the sense that, like, everybody that's here that had to have a confirmation, this is the group of people that was doing all that follow-up. And I mean, it's like, couldn't have done this without them. We created an internal shuttle, because the hotels provide shuttle from each hotel to the airport and then back. But a lot of you want to get a lot of places. You can sit down there. You want to get a lot of places, so we created an internal shuttle, and those individuals have to have been on deck, to help service you so that you feel served. And they've just done a fantastic job of whatever time of day or night, they are getting people to where people want to go if you don't have transportation, and that's tremendous. Then the staff outside, we were sold out on this event 2 weeks ago. So we closed registration, I believe, last Friday, because they were going to be in transit to Isleta. All the tables were sold out 2 weeks ago, so we had no room for displays. We started with 16, ended up with 20. Everything had been sold out. We were gifted with the Pueblo Artisans, because Isleta does an annual Pueblo Artisans. So we're like, oh yeah, can we get the Pueblo Artisans? So they're on the entryway when you come in. So people who would want to go to Old Town or somewhere else to have to do any shopping, we brought it to you in cooperation with Isleta. So the total New Mexican experience is totally accessible. We want everything to be as convenient as possible. There was such a demand in terms of the agenda, we had to expand into an evening agenda. So your evening sessions that they weren't really add-ons, but a lot of the USDA staff wanted to be able to get a closer relationship, and so that people aren't always hearing it from us, but that you build a relationship. So we want to build the relationships with you, and we thought the best way to do that, we added on evening sessions so that a lot of detail can get done. So without no further ado, I wanted to bring up our MC. Really, he has done such a fabulous job on keeping us on time. Magdaleno.
Buenos dias. Good morning. So the first thing we're going to do before I get out of control here is we're going to hear an update on elections and candidates and voting and all of that. So where are you, my brother? Oh, he's right here. Okay. Take it away.
I just wanted to mention that if for you that are just coming in today, we're holding an advisory, non-binding. It's basically an election to give some advice to the board. We need some, especially a few updates to our bylaws, and so we can run a little bit more smoothly. And so we'd appreciate if you haven't received a ballot, just if you go outside the door here, you can pick it up there. And then and for you that haven't received your ballots, but you haven't turned them in, we have until 1 o'clock this afternoon. And then we're going to close the poll there, and so we can give an update to the board this evening. So we appreciate if everybody, especially everybody that has worked with the board and everything, that you can see that we can help, that you can give some help us give some good advice. Thank you.
A couple of things I want to share with you today. Yesterday, you saw me giving people 4 minutes, 1 minute, and you realized I used this finger, not another finger, for 1 minute, because I wanted to be polite. And so I was somebody was talking with me, and I said, well, I got to go to the boys' room, and they said, you got 1 minute. So I didn't get everything taken care of. One is I want to talk about DNA quickly. I've always wanted to know what I was. People would ask me, what are you, Mexican, Native American, African American? So I used to tell them I was 40% Chihuahua and 60% Doberman. And you don't want to find out. And so I finally did my DNA, and the first one said that I was 42% Southern North American and Northern Mexico Native American. So I'm 42%. The reason I come to Isleta, I need to pick up at least another 9% so I can be 51% indigenous. So hopefully I'll get that done. The other thing that I wanted to tell you is I'm not going to be here tomorrow, so you'll be saved. I have to go do Dia de los Muertos in my house. We're organizing it where we celebrate the dead. And the thing is, if you have altars in your house, like we're doing in our house, our motto is that when you wake up, you go to the altar. If your picture's on the altar, go back to bed, because you're just dead. So that's what you want to do. And so the other thing with the Dia de los Muertos that we're doing is that to honor our ancestors is that we're going to honor them by voting and getting everybody else to vote. This country's history or future lies in us as citizens to vote. If you're not a non-citizen, if you're a non-citizen, you can help people, drive them to the polls, but we got to get everybody voting. So that's what we're going to honor at our Dia de los Muertos there, and work hard to do it because it's very important. For the rest of you who want to insult me privately, Rudy can give you my email. I write for 2 Latino newspapers, and I write a lot about my politics, my life, Chicano history, Native American history, and fights that we've had to get clear. But I think everything that you have to understand is that everybody's voice is important. And I want to apologize for yesterday because we had panels that were too tight, too many speakers, and we didn't have a chance for question and answers. I know a lot of you wanted to have the questions answered, and they wanted to, they were giving me dirty looks and saying, why can't we do this? Because otherwise I would have had to eliminate 10 or 20 other speakers. But so we want to, in the workshops, we're going to have a chance to have that dialogue. And this morning, I hope we'll have time to start with some questions and answers. So before we begin with the formal program, I'd like to invite Eric Chavez from Senator Lujan's office to come and give us a few words. Eric, come on up. You can always also give us money.
Well, thank you so very much. Give him a round of applause, everyone. He wants that money, so he doesn't stop working, that's for sure. So again, my name is Eric Chavez. I'm a field representative for U.S. Senator Ben Ray Lujan's office, and it's just a pleasure to be with you here today. And the senator has provided a few words. So thank you for inviting me to join you today for the 2022 National Latinos Farmers and Ranchers Trade Association Annual Conference. I appreciate the opportunity to share a few words in your discussions of our state's agricultural needs and share how I'm working with our communities to support our farmers, ranchers, and producers like all of you here today. I'd like to start by thanking President Rudy Arredondo, Mr. Eugene Pickett, Florence Gallegos, Jaime Chavez, and the rest of the NLFRTA members and staff for your continued leadership and commitment to advocating for the needs of our Latino and minority farmers, ranchers, and producers. Growing up on a small farm in Nlfr, I know firsthand the lessons of working the land and getting your hands dirty. To this day, as I continue to farm the land that was handed down to me by my grandparents, I'm reminded of what my grandparents instilled in me, the lessons to always leave things better than how you found it. As a member of the Senate Agricultural Committee, I understand how vital agriculture is for New Mexico's local economies, farmers, ranchers, and producers. They deserve to be treated with dignity and respect from all who benefit from their hard work, and most of all, the federal government. I am proud to fight for the needs of our farmers and ranchers by working to develop legislation that will strengthen programs to improve the lives of our agricultural community members. This year and leading into next year, New Mexico has an opportunity to ensure our voice is heard in Washington by working on the 2023 Farm Bill. Every 5 years, the reauthorization of the Farm Bill presents an opportunity to ensure that our government is working collaboratively with our farmers, ranchers, and rural communities to provide access to critical programs that promote and strengthen our agricultural economy and local and national economies. The Farm Bill has been one of my top priorities since I came to Congress. But now, as a member of the Senate Agricultural Committee, we have tremendous opportunity to ensure that this upcoming 2023 Farm Bill delivers for New Mexico. That is why I worked to introduce language in the 2018 Farm Bill for the Environmental Quality Incentives Program, EQIP, the Regional Conservation Partnership Program, RCPP, and the Conservation Stewardship Program, CSP. I also championed historic advancements for Hispanic and Native American farmers and ranchers, acequias and land grant Mercedes, as well as nutrition programs to ensure they are fully supported by USDA programs. Acequias have been the lifeblood of many New Mexico communities for centuries, but until 2018, the Farm Bill did not adequately address those needs. By advancing the Acequia Conservation Program Eligibility Act, I made sure that acequias and traditional communities were able to access critical conservation and environmental programs needed to ensure their survival for centuries to come. The 2018 Farm Bill also included my Assisting Socially Disadvantaged and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers Act to ensure USDA training and outreach programs are targeted at Hispanic, Native American, and veteran farmers and producers. And I was proud that the 2018 Farm Bill included my Growing Value Added Economies Act to increase the supply of locally grown foods and producers' access to new markets. I also made sure that the 2018 Farm Bill increased support for vital federal nutrition programs that New Mexico communities rely on for food for our growing teenagers and kids. Adding to this, I'm also proud to have introduced the Land Grant Mercedes Traditional Use Recognition and Consultation Act, legislation to eliminate the disconnect that the federal agencies have with traditional communities. I was also honored to work on the passage of the Historic American Rescue Plan, which provides critical support to agricultural economy and delivered nutrition assistance for New Mexico families. With the recent passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, we not only have more tools and resources to equip our farmers and ranchers with the support needed to fight climate change and preserve valuable natural resources, but also expand and develop our vital farm bill programs that will allow rural New Mexican communities to thrive and strengthen their local economies. This legislation includes a strong investment of more than $3 billion in relief for historically underserved farmers who have experienced discrimination by the USDA, and I'm already working with the USDA to ensure New Mexicans get their fair share. As New Mexico continues to face extreme weather conditions as a result of climate change, especially drought, wildfires, it's critical that the Senate moves with urgency to address the rising temperatures and damages resulting from extreme weather events felt by New Mexicans, especially our farmers. Our agricultural community have been on the front lines of this crisis. We've seen catastrophic wildfires, extreme drought, and dangerous flooding impacting access to food and water in far too many communities. So through my Hermit's Peak Calf Canyon Fire Assistance Act, which passed into law in the recent government spending bill, we will provide $2.5 billion for FEMA to establish a program to more fully compensate the victims of the fires for those losses. The federal government will also take the burden off state and localities by covering 100% cost share for programs administered by FEMA and USDA. Through these policies, I'm proud to work with Congress and all that Congress has done to support New Mexico's agricultural community. However, I know our work is far from over, and that is why this Congreso is so very important to address the challenges our farmers, ranchers, and producers face. Through the discussions and lessons that happen here, we can continue building on the progress needed to improve our agricultural communities throughout New Mexico and the nation. I look forward to continuing to work alongside New Mexico farmers, ranchers, and producers to ensure they have access to critical programs and resources to be successful. So if my office can be of any assistance, please don't hesitate to reach out. Sincerely, Ben Ray Lujan, your United States Senator. So thank you so very much.
I was impressed with the letter because all the issues it had, taking care of our veterans, Indigenous and Latino veterans who are producers who come back and need the help, to add extra language in the policies for FEMA so that we can have some restoration for the people who lost everything in those fires, and the recognition that what role climate change has on what we're doing and how we're doing it right now. And so I hope you, Eric, that you'll tell the senator how much we appreciate his voice. And now we're going to get into our speakers, and I think we have we're going to have Terrence Courtney. Are you here, Terrence? There he is, ready to come up. This is our first morning speaker, and it's exciting to have Terrence here with us. Come on up, Terrence. And what time do we have now? I gotta see, check it out here. So maybe if you can do about 15 minutes and then we'll do some Q&A. Okay. Why don't you give a good hand and welcome to Terrence.
Thank you,
brother.
Thank you.
Good morning. Well, before I begin, I got a lot of stuff going on here. Let me put it down. Before I begin, I have to kind of recalibrate. I had expected to talk a little longer, but I'm grateful for the time frame, so that helps me think about how to move forward. The first thing I want to say is I really appreciate this opportunity to be here with all of you today. I got here yesterday, and though I was prepared, I was still surprised that the Southwest gets this cold. Uh, but nonetheless, from the moment I got here, I received a very, very warm welcome from all the staff, folks like Deanna and others. So I feel like though it's cold outside, it's very warm in here. And ever since I've been here, there have been moments that really have illustrated to me that I'm in the right place. Um, for example, last night I was able to attend that evening session where we walked through the history of Emiliano Zapata, a revolutionary who helped kind of really advance the agrarianist movement in Mexico. And then listening to the comments here today, seeing how passionate people are about their organization, it reminds me so much of where I come from and the kind of driving spirit characterizes the organization that I represent. So I'm very grateful to be here. And also, before I move forward, I must take some time before my remarks to give thanks to Mr. Rudy Arendando for making this possible, for Stefan Templeton, Anna Mejia, and of course, my brother Eugene Pickett for inviting me to share these thoughts. I met Stefan a couple of months ago at the Federation's Southern Cooperatives annual meeting. And from that moment, I think we made a very strong connection. What stood out to me about he and Anna was that they were able to really blend in into the Federation family. When I first saw them, I did not know they weren't members. And especially Stefan, who actually participated in our panel discussions and asked some very sharp and pointed questions. I was like, whoa, he's one of us. But it was only later in the evening when he and I were sitting out in the front yard in front of the Federation's auditorium that I learned that he actually represented an organization called the National Latino Farmers and Ranchers. And he shared with me the work that you do and your mission. And I became fascinated by the similarities between Nlfr and the Federation. Later on, I shared this experience with my executive director, Mr. Cornelius Blanding, and I told him I had had a conversation with a rep from Nlfr and that I thought this was a relationship that we needed to pursue, cultivate, and explore. Cornelius immediately agreed, and he gave me the green light to be here in solidarity, and here I am. Thank you. But I also need to offer apologies for the absence of Cornelius. I think in Washington, D.C., once he got talking to Mr. Arendando, he got so excited that he overbooked himself. And and let's be honest, in reality, it's his executive assistant who manages his calendar. So I have to say, I apologize for that. But nonetheless, I'm here and I'm very proud to be here. And I was just sharing with folks, I feel at home. I like your style. I like the way people move. I like the focus that y'all have on building for your community. So that's something that's deeply inspirational to me. Another reason I'm so moved to be here is that this is an opportunity for me personally. For nearly 27 years, I've dedicated my life to organizing with communities of color oppressed by the intersecting evils, or what Bell Hooks would define as white supremacist capitalist patriarchy. I've worked to build what we've used to call Black-Brown alliances in workplaces as a union organizer, then again as a leader of coalitions in Atlanta that partnered with groups representing undocumented immigrants. One of my proudest moments from that time was working in coalition to mobilize 60,000 people from across the Southeast to come to a little city just north of Atlanta called Doraville. And y'all may recall that back in 2005, Joe Sensenbrenner got a bill passed in Congress that was one of the most draconian pieces of legislation against immigrants up to that time. The Latino community stood up and they pulled off what amounted to a national strike. And in Atlanta, we brought together civil rights organizations, churches, student groups, and labor unions to stand in solidarity. That was a beautiful day and a powerful day. And on top of that, the people beat back the Sensenbrenner attack. Something people said could not be done. Well, it happened. That moment helped shift my consciousness. For no longer was Black-Brown alliance building something sitting in the toolbox of theory. I saw it work with my own eyes, and I saw that through practice. So I would say Paulo Freire would have been proud of our praxis. So I'm here today to do that again in a small way in the field of cooperative development. Also, I want to also define terms because oftentimes people don't understand what I mean or what the Federation means by cooperatives. It is somewhat a term that is contested and confused. Well, for us, we have a very specific definition. So what is a cooperative? A cooperative is a business formed on a voluntary basis that's collectively owned by the members who come together to meet a need. We believe it differs from a nonprofit. We also see that it differs from traditional businesses. It differs from nonprofits in as much as cooperatives for us are about generating surpluses, or what some people like to use or say is profits. We believe generating those surpluses can be a good to help our members and create community and collective wealth. Nonprofits can't do that. Cooperatives are also unlike traditional businesses. For example, cooperatives are all about shared and collective ownership of the business. Cooperatives are about members who profit from the use of their cooperative. In a cooperative, each member gets a vote. I believe cooperatives are one of the most horizontal and equitable formations we can create. Democracy, equity, and fairness are at the center of cooperative development. Whereas with traditional businesses, you often have an individual or a tiny elite who own that business. They also control the profits, though they themselves don't generate those profits. And finally, in traditional businesses, we often see unequal power relations and exploitation at the center of their model. So I think cooperatives are the way to go. I don't want to talk about the different types of cooperatives that the Federation develops. Of course, agricultural and producer cooperatives are one. The vast majority of our members belong to those. But we also work on consumer cooperatives. Many of you might be familiar with cooperatively owned grocery stores. That's a consumer cooperative. We also work on credit unions. Credit unions are financial cooperatives. Housing cooperatives. In Alabama, we have a 40-unit housing community that's cooperatively owned by the members. Thank you. We also develop worker-owned cooperatives where the employees of a workplace are also its owners. But some may ask, why talk about co-ops at all? Well, again, when Stephen and I were sitting in that front yard, it became clear that though our communities had some differences, fundamentally, we were grappling with many of the same issues. For example, both African Americans and Latinos face systemic racism that manifests itself in overt and covert ways, in policies written and unwritten at the local, regional, and national level. This is the case even when we are born here. That is to say, even those of us who are citizens must constantly fight for our rights. Think about that. Think about that and realize that we're living through a time right now where there are powerful forces seeking to turn the clock back. These backward thinkers are bringing back from the dead policies from the 1800s. More of this is surely to come. In what form, we cannot say, but if we don't organize ourselves and cooperate, we may start to hear the echoes of Dred Scott that said that Black people, and may I say brown people, were never thought to be included in this American story, that we had no rights that ought to be respected. We could hear that again. It could come back. So when we look at it from this perspective and an economic perspective, we see more similarities. Consider that Black African Americans and Latinos control much less of the economic pie that we produce. Our rates of poverty, of homelessness, of hunger, and mass incarceration far exceed our proportions in society. The commonalities continue when we use our farmer rancher lenses. The USDA reports that the average age of a Black farmer is 60 years old, as compared to 57 years old for Latinos. The vast majority of Black and Latino farmers engage in specialty crops and livestock. And probably most telling is that 57% of Black and Latino farmers earn less than $5,000 a year from farming. Less than $5,000 per year. This means the majority of Black and Latino farmers cannot make enough to live from farming alone. This tells us that these farmers must seek out other income to get by. Furthermore, in such a weakened position, farmers are clearly at the mercy of the big agricultural companies and large family farms when it comes to processing. And we all know those who control the processing set the prices. Additionally, for those of us concerned with providing our communities with healthy sources of food, with having some measure of control over our food systems to deal with food apartheid, we have to ask ourselves, how are we ever going to get a handle on this when our farmers are in such a poor economic situation? My friends, we have a lot of problems that we have to deal with, and there's a great deal of need to be met. The Federation believes that cooperatives are a means to create solutions and grapple with these needs. I think to illustrate why we focus on cooperatives so much, it's worth walking through the history of the Federation to understand. During the late 1960s in the South, despite the passage of the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965, a racist regime was still in effect, and chances of physical violence was still very real. Civil rights workers from the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee, SNCC, and the Congress on Racial Equality, CORE, went into the South, into these rural areas, and they were themselves transformed. They met communities who were, yes, still oppressed by racist laws and economic exploitation. However, these same people demonstrated the capacity to not only withstand these cruel injustices, but develop at a very basic level the future model for our organization, cooperatives. Many of these Black farmers were also Black landowners who wrestled with an additional problem of an ongoing and systematic program by local and national forces to rob Black families of land that they had earned the right to own. And so in 1967, 22 cooperatives from across the South gathered in Atlanta, Georgia, to ratify the charter that became the foundation for the Federation of Southern Cooperatives Land Assistance Fund. Today, we've grown to more than 70 cooperatives throughout the South, owned and operated by Black farmers, landowners, residents, and workers. It was at this convention of cooperatives 55 years ago that members decided on our mission. and that is to be a catalyst for the development of self-determining communities through cooperative economic development, land retention, and advocacy. But essentially, what those founders were talking about was advancing economic justice to create conditions for more self-determination. Here are a few things that I think made the Federation unique among its civil rights contemporaries. One, these 22 businesses chose not to operate in what we call today silos. They recognized that operating in isolation hindered their chances of long-term sustainability, let alone prosperity. Early on, organizers intersected issues of racial justice, economic justice, and gender justice with a bottom-up approach to organizing. The organizing centered in rural communities versus major cities. 4, Black women were at the center of the work and held key leadership roles both in the local cooperatives and the emerging regional structure. Black farmers were the core membership from the very beginning. Okay, so I'm moving along, but with this foundation, the Federation was able to achieve a number of victories. I define those victories as interpersonal and institutional. We've helped thousands of individual farmers preserve their lands, increase their incomes, but institutionally, we've done far more by helping to initiate programs like the 2501 program to serve socially disadvantaged farmers and building an organization like the Federation, winning key victories to democratize rural electric cooperatives. Cooperatives are not perfect, but I believe they present a foundation because they're based on some key values and principles like democracy, autonomy, education, and concern for community. We still have some structural barriers to overcome. Right now, at this time, the South is not built for cooperatives. It's not built for what we need to build. We lack enabling legislation to support cooperatives. Cooperatives can't access the same tax incentives and tax deferments that traditional businesses have access to. We can't get SBA loans because of the collective ownership structure to cooperatives. And there are limitations on communities, small communities, who want to build locally owned credit unions to defend themselves against predatory lending. We also have social and generational obstacles where our folks are aging out, but the young people are not taking up the reins. So our strategy is to build broad and deep. Over the next 5 years, we're going to be expanding the number of cooperatives we develop and expanding the number of cooperators. We're going to be putting more investment into regional marketing so that our cooperatives can scale up and level up. We're redoubling our efforts on the advocacy level to engage the Farm Bill and these issues of debt relief for farmers. Heavy lifting cannot be done alone, even for an organization like ours, which is chartered in 13 states. We have millions of dollars of assets that are owned by our members, and we have 50 staff spread out throughout the South. We still can't do it alone, and we recognize that. So we came here today to support you as a friend and to offer encouragement, because I think we can agree we got some difficult days ahead. So I want to end my remarks with a quote, and it reads, "At the heart of all that civilization has meant and developed is community, the mutually cooperative and voluntary venture of, I'll say, humanity to assume a semblance of responsibility for his sister and brother." Dr. Martin Luther King. Thanks, Ken. Say you're from Atlanta? Okay. I live in Stone Mountain. I'm gonna try to get one question in.
I just found out Terrence is one of my homeboys from Georgia.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna give my homeboy, somebody's got a good question to him. We're gonna take 2 questions from the audience, then we'll go to the workshops, because he's come a long way and I gotta respect my homie. So we got a question from anybody? One over there.
No, you're called the Southern Cooperative, so. of Labrador.
Yeah, I mean, you really can think of most of the Southeast. We were actually chartered in Washington DC because again, the South would not recognize an entity like ours. So we're really considered a foreign entity where we work. But we work as far north as Virginia, down to Florida, Carolinas, and then we come all the way out west to Texas. And that includes Arkansas, Oklahoma, Tennessee, etc. Most of the Southeast.
One more question? Over there.
Yes, I did mention, I did hear you say how cooperatives come together collectively to enhance their own wealth. But collectively, they can't really get a loan together. So by being a synergism where each people, everybody involved in that cooperative become more profitable, they themselves then have more access to capital, correct?
Yes, and I'll make one small correction. We can't get loans from the SBA, but you know, once you become a cooperative, you enter this new universe. And there are cooperative banks that we partner with, like CoBank. I actually sit on the board of Shared Capital, which is a CDFI, a cooperative lender. And the Federation is working with a number of organizations across the South to start up additional cooperatively owned lending institutions. So there is credit for cooperatives out there, but you really have to be a part of the co-op universe to get there.
One more question from over here, the one. Go ahead.
Thank you, thank you. And I'll just say one thing in response. That's a growing strategy in urban spaces. We actually help initiate that in urban spaces in Cleveland and elsewhere, where we facilitated a relationship between NRCS and local folks who are interested in being growers in order to help them access what are called high tunnels, hoop houses. And those hoop houses are like mini greenhouses. It helps extend the growing season in northern climates. So, and what we argue is that it's great for one person to get that, but start to think collectively. If you got 10, 12 folks who have these greenhouses, hoop houses, let's think about how we can harness that collective productive capacity in the cooperative model and then facilitate the other businesses or provide food to people who need it.
How about a big hand for them?
One more.
One more question?
One more.
Okay, this is it.
One more.
Thank you.
Okay, what is it?
Wow, that works. I'm really impressed with your organization, and I'm just curious if there are analogous organizations in other parts of the country that you're aware of.
There are other cooperators throughout the South. There are organizations that do this work, but again, what makes the Federation unique is that one, we're situated in mostly rural communities because we see that that's an untapped need, not to diss urban spaces. I'm from Atlanta, but I think a lot of the rural conditions have gone unnoticed for a number of years. Moreover, we work with Black farmers in particular, but not exclusively so. So I can't think of a ton of examples like us, especially with the history and track record we have. But there are other organizations, make no mistake. Again, there is a co-op universe, our international co-op universe. So there are connections to be made, and we'd be glad to help you make them if you're interested in that.
Thank you. Big applause. Okay, it's time we're gonna have a break and then we're gonna go into the workshops.